All right, well, good morning, everybody. It's good to be back together. How many of you are feeling a little anxious about a few hours from now coming up? Anyone? Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your honesty. I see that hand. I see that hand. That's good. It's going to be great. We're just going to, it's good. Anyway, I'm looking forward to today. I think we've been in a series called Generosity for the last couple weeks, and I'm excited because I'm excited for what God's been doing in my own heart as I've been thinking about this, and it's given me a lot of language to kind of frame something I've been desiring for myself as I think about my time, my money, my resources, but also as I think about what I hope for you as your pastor, like what I hope for you as an individual as well. We're framing this idea of generosity as it's not just about like checking a box, right? So if you grew up in church, you probably heard like 10% tithe kind of thing. Like if I do that, I've checked my box, I'm good, move on, whatever else it is. We're looking at it more from a standpoint of it's a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual discipline. And spiritual practices position our hearts and our minds in a place to where we can they basically put us in God's presence and then allows us to be transformed by His presence. And so, and it's something to be practiced, meaning it takes time. And it takes time to learn, to develop and grow, and it's in a skill that can grow as well. Have you ever been given responsibility over something that wasn't yours before? Recently, I was going to France. We were going to look for a partner over there. And as I was going over there, I was sitting there talking to a guy who had a University of Georgia logo on his shirt because I went to the University of Georgia. And anytime I see someone that I don't know that wears that, I go and ask them about that, unless I'm in the Atlanta airport, then because everyone's wearing that. But because I just want to know, like, hey, are you from Georgia? Because I'm from Georgia, and I'm really excited to talk about Georgia. And then specifically the University of Georgia, okay? And we talked for like 3-4 minutes, and he very quickly trusted me with all of his stuff, like all of his luggage, because he was going to go buy some food. Which, don't do that if you go to the airport. Who are you? Also, what if it was a bomb? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't, clearly. Well, I don't know. He went on a different flight than I did. But still, like, that's crazy. But you know what I did? I watched that stuff like a hawk. I mean, that stuff was my stuff. I made sure no one touched it. Anyone tried to sit even near the bag, I was like, I'm not even going to let it happen. Because I was taking responsibility for it. It wasn't mine. But I was taking responsibility for it. There's a word we use to describe something like that. It's called stewardship. That's what stewardship is. It's where you're not the owner of something, but you've been given the responsibility to watch over, to be the caretaker of something as well. And that's really, as we begin to think about the idea of generosity, and specifically as we talk about, we're going to talk about money today. So if you got uncomfortable, I'm sorry. We're going to talk about it today. It might make you uncomfortable. I know there's many stories and stuff that come that come as that you might have about it, specifically with churches, maybe hurt, maybe distrust, maybe full trust. I don't know. But that's one of the main ways to think about just our resources is that God has given us stewardship over money. And He's given us stewardship over His world. And we learned this from Genesis 1, 26 and 28. If you've been with us for a while or at all, we probably have said this verse multiple times. But you see this is that God created man, verse 27, in His own image. And in the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. And God blessed them and said to him, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves. That God has given human beings stewardship over the world. We also use this language. We say that God has given humans the ability or the job, the vocation to rule and reign His good world. That's what He's given us responsibility to do. We are stewards. If you're a Lord of the Rings fans, there's a steward in Lord of the Rings. He's the steward of Gondor. He doesn't do the best job, but that's his job. He's responsible for the kingdom. He's not the king, but he's responsible for it, and that's what we are. That we are stewards. And so, as we think about this, a guy, an author that we like, his name's John Mark Comer, has these three views of these three views of stewardship that I really like that I want to share with you. The first one is that God owns it all, that everything that we have belongs to God. Everything. That God owns it all. During Jesus' day, there were two major views of ownership. One was the Greek view, which was not ownership. It was actually called non-ownership. They viewed that it was more of a maybe socialist viewpoint, if you will, but it was more so that society, you don't own anything, is that all resources belong to society. They all belong to the group. And you can read, like the philosopher Plato's Republic, and you can see these ideas that would exist there. The other one, which is more of our view, the Western view, but during that day it would have been the Roman view, would it be that whatever you have is yours, you own it, and that you have authority over it. If you have a field, it's yours. You can do what you want with it. You can plant what you want in it. You can burn that field down if you want to burn that field down. And that's kind of what we've taken on for the most part, is this Western view as well. What's yours is yours. What's mine is mine. Don't touch it or I'll sue you. Then there's that was supposed to be funny, but it's okay. Thank you for snickering. A few of you, you got it. It's fine. But the Judeo-Christian view that Jesus kind of introduced is, again, this word stewardship or caretaking. God is the owner. We are the caretakers. Now, just very quickly, do a quick little inventory. We're not going to do a show of hands. I would imagine many of us do not hold the Greek view, this non-ownership view. If you do, that's okay. But we're not going to do, again, no show of hands, all right? But we don't, like if I said, hey, who has that non-ownership view, that everything belongs to the society? No. Most of us would say, like, no, what's mine is mine. Like, I would even say, I default into, like, my money, my stuff, my things, it's mine. But I'm trying to shift my heart into going, no, like God has given me everything, God owns everything, and I'm going to be responsible. I want to be a good steward of what he has. A few verses, if you want to see God talking or passages about this. Leviticus 25:33, it'll be on the screen. It says, the land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. This is God talking about it. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. Deuteronomy 10:14 says, behold, the Lord your God belong heaven and the heaven of heavens, the earth with all that is in it. So God owns the earth, the heaven, and the heaven of the heavens. That's a lot of things to own, and he owns it all. So, but what does God do? He entrusts us with his resources to do good. That we were created to take the things in this life and to do good with them as well. We were entrusted by God with his resources to do good with them. And so we live under this false assumption. And I'm telling you, my vantage point is, I'm giving you a biblical vantage point of this. Like, so maybe you've thought about it from maybe your own point of view. I'm trying to give you the way that I currently understand the scriptures, my point of view. So we live with this false assumption that any money that we receive is ours to consume. And I mean, if you looked at my bank account or my credit card bill, like you would see, like, I can live that way for sure. But what if we changed and shifted our ideas in this idea that, no, God owns everything. God owns everything, and my job is to figure out how should I spend every dollar that I have in accordance to what God wants me to do as well. But because we have this understanding or belief that everything that we have is ours to consume, we live at a pace or a clip above or right at our income level. And I think you can do research on most Americans live either right at the line or right above the line, reaching for it as well, which we talked more about this last week, so you can look back about watching out for greed. But it creates no margin in your life. So like there's no margin for you to be generous, even if you wanted to, because you're living at or above the line that you have as well. And so as God's stewards, one of the conclusions of this, and this was the hard one, so just be prepared, is that all of our money is not for us. Is that all of your resources is not for you. All of your time is not for you. But some of it is. Good news. Okay? Some of it is. all right? Some of it is for you. Why? Well, he wants you to provide for your family. And also, like, if you're like sitting here, you're like, well, I have some stuff, and it means I just need to suffer a little bit more. It's like, also the things that you do have, God wants you to enjoy. But you look at it, if God owns everything, you look at it from a place of like, then God has provided that for you. 1 Timothy 6:17 is a great passage. He talks about how, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. This haughty eyes, just looking, it's the coveting. It's like looking at my neighbor. It's the keeping up with the Joneses. It's, I need this, I need that, I need that. And that uncertainty of riches is the lie that riches will provide security for you other than God. Like God is the place of security. God is the place of contentment, and learning to be content in Him. And that, like when He does provide things, I'm going to enjoy them. I'm not going to feel sorry for enjoying them because God has provided them, but knowing the line and knowing the difference as well. So God owns everything. And so, I should provide for my family. I should take care of them. I should provide food and clothing and shelter and security for them. The next thing, there's really three areas. So you should take care of your family and your needs. There is generosity in giving to your church, giving to those in need, giving to the mission of God and things that take the gospel of Jesus to the nations, things that are going to multiply disciples, things that stand for the justice that God is doing and will complete when He returns. And then the last one is savings, to build away as well. Now, I've always thought about savings as like you have like maybe an emergency fund, and then you have your retirement, and I think those are good things to put money towards. I'm not telling you like don't have a 401k or don't have a 403b. Like you should do that. That would be wise of you to do. That would be taking care of your family when you get to an age and you can't work anymore. But also, like, what if we looked at the idea of saving as like there's dreams that God has put on your heart. There's kingdom things that God might want to do with your resources, but you need to save for. Maybe there's a missionary that you could support that, like, not right now, but like that missionary has a dream and that you're going to be able to fund it because you're like, I'm going to put X amount of dollars away regularly to save so that I can support these kingdom things. Maybe you have your own dream that you want to support, but like right now, it's not the time, but maybe 10 years from now, there's something that you can do as well. But we want to steward, and we want not to rip off Dave Ramsey, but because he has that every dollar thing. If you don't know Dave Ramsey every dollar, that's okay too. You can Google him, and then your reels will be full of him laughing at people making stupid financial decisions. But it's pretty funny. But his whole concept about every dollar needs to have a place. That's the thing with stewardship, though, is asking God, discerning God, going, all right, Lord, like where does every dollar go? How much do I need for my family? How much do I need to give? How much do I need to save? Those are some great questions. And so, because God, and then also the third one about stewardship is that God blesses us not just to have more, but to give more. Is that God blesses us not just to have more, but to give more. If you steward well, God will give you more to steward, not so that you can have more, like not that so that you can have more, like that heart's the greedy heart, but so that you can give more. 2 Corinthians 9:8-11 says, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may be abound in every good work. As it is written, He has distributed freely, He has given to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and what? And multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. And so, because I think sometimes when you think, like it's like, you're familiar with the prosperity gospel, where it's like, I give so that I'll get. If I give, then I'll get, right? I'm going to give, and then God's going to give me that bigger house or that nicer car and that another thing. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not the right way to perceive giving. That's not That's not the blessing that we're talking about here. God won't bless me if I give. And you're not getting the point if that's what you've thought in the past, that generosity is actually this practice to correct our heart about the corruption of where the love of money has replaced the love of God in our lives. And we shift our hearts back to God is a good Father who owns everything, and I trust him for everything, and I find contentment in him for everything because he is good, and that he calls me to be generous so that I can participate in the work that he is doing. It's not just about checking a box. It becomes about his mission in the world for his name and his gospel to go forward in the world. And so your life is enriched so that you can be more generous, so that you can participate even more in the mission of God, that your resources can participate in the mission of God even more. And so Randy Alcorn, he wrote this book, Giving is the Good Life. This book, it's a pretty book too, right? It's really nice. He wrote this book that says, he has this quote, he says, God blesses us to raise our standard of giving, not our standard of living. And I think sometimes we look at that, we can trick ourselves into the prosperity gospel when he's like, you might increase your income level, like many of you will just naturally just keep working and you get a promotion and keep living long enough and you keep getting promotion or a new job or whatever else it is. And it's like he might want to do that so that you can have an even greater kingdom impact as well. And this book too, if this is interesting, you want to think more about it, there's a lot of questions in here after every single chapter that will really challenge the way that you view giving and generosity as well. It's really powerful as well. So but how much, we start getting into this, so how much should I keep for myself? Is it the traditional, I got up to giving a tithe, and so that's God's, and then 90% is the rest of mine. What is it? What do I keep? What do I give? How much? Where does it go? What's an appropriate standard of living? Where's the line between enjoying life and wasting too much money on luxury? What kind of car should I drive? How many pairs of shoes should I own? How many vacations? That one hurts me. Should I go on a year? But these are good questions. And I don't know if we ever start asking these questions. Maybe we don't ask them. You never not pray something because you're afraid oh, God's definitely going to say no. You know what I mean? I'm not praying that. Nope. God, should I buy this house? I'm not going to pray about that because I want this house. It's my house. Not your house, my house. But I think that's why we don't do it. And I think that's a scarcity mindset towards the Lord. It's not like God doesn't want to, God's going to take care of you. Now, I think in our society, we've probably inflated what we think a need is, right? As Jake has been saying to me this entire series, when a want becomes a need, there's greed, okay? And that's Jake Eichert's phrase, so just so you know, he loves that phrase, and I love that phrase. But what do we do? And I think that we should be, as someone that is a steward, we should be asking these questions. As someone that goes I look at everything I have and go, this is the tension I'm fighting. I think I own this. And in transparency, you have the freedom you can do whatever you want with this. But as someone that's trying to follow Jesus, I'm going, God, I do believe that you own everything. I do believe that you've given me stewardship over my life and to rule and reign the areas of the life that you've given me. What do you want me to do with this? And so I'm going to consult you because I'm gonna trust you because I want to follow you. And that's what generosity begins to do in your life, is where you begin to consult God on little decisions like this that could have immense kingdom impacts. Because this is what God is doing. In some ways, this is the why behind giving, is that God was so generous to you and so gracious to you that you want to be generous in return, and you want to participate in the work that he's doing in the world around you, and in the world around you. And so, as a man, as someone that is a steward over maybe a house, or that guy's luggage, I didn't make any decisions about his luggage for him. If I was going to, I'd have to ask him, hey, is it cool if I take some of your sunflower seeds, or what do you think about, I don't know, that's a bad example. Anyway, so at this time, we're going to do, what I am going to do is going to kind of shift is, I'm going to kind of talk to you about two things, is we're going to talk about one. I hope that you know, like God owns everything. So if I could break the sermon down into these three sections, like God owns everything, and we are His stewards. Second part of this sermon is I am going to give you a brief history of what giving or tithing looks like in the Scriptures. And in three ways. There's a pre-law, so before the Sinai covenant. There is a during the law. And then there is the New Testament talks on giving. And then you might be like, gosh, we're going to be here until the Chiefs kick off. No, we're not. Maybe when the Redskins kick off. Or, sorry, the Commanders kick off. It's also a joke. Not funny, though. It's never funny when the pastor makes a joke about talking about being long. And then lastly is I'll share what my heart is for you for generosity. That's just kind of where we're going. So, and I want to say this too. Like I know this can be uncomfortable. You might be like, you seem uncomfortable, Russell. I am. Thank you for asking. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I just want you to think about this, and also too, like there's no campaign coming. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you've been in a church where, you know, it's like, oh, they do the talk, and then 2 weeks later, it's like, we got a campaign coming. It's not coming, okay? Just let you know. It's just we want to talk about spiritual practices that transform our hearts and draw us closer to Jesus. And this is a practice that will draw you closer to Jesus. I promise you. It'll mature you in your faith in Christ. So, history of, and this is going to be fast because we got to get out of here, okay? So, history of giving in the Scriptures. So pre-law, meaning pre-Sinai covenant, which is basically before halfway through Exodus, okay? In Genesis chapter 14 is where you see the first time a tithe is called, okay? So this is with Abraham and Melchizedek. If you're doing our reading plan, you read it this week, all right? So this is Abraham and Melchizedek. And blessed be the Most High who delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave a tenth of everything to this Melchizedek, who is a Jesus type, that's a different thing that we can get into a different time, but he kind of reflects the person of Jesus. Even Abraham, too, he also gave everything else he got from the spoils all back to the people. Abram at this moment, generous guy. So him again in Genesis chapter 18, verse 22. And this, and blessed be God most high. There we go. And this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So again, you see this pre-law that a tenth, it's a tithe. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the church language about the word tithe. Some people like to say, I tithe this amount or that amount. Tithe means 10. So it is a unit. It is 10%. That's just what it is. Or it means a tenth is what it is. I personally have recently been trying to, you ever take an object and that's your new unit for how you determine how expensive something is? So for example, I've been really thinking about buying a Blackstone. You know, the little griddle thing? I think about it all the time. Recently it was a Traeger and now it's a Blackstone, okay? The Blackstone I'm looking at is it's $400 at Costco, okay? Because it has a nice little tarp over it and all these things, right? And I could make some smash burgers. I could do stir fry. I could even start a side hustle. It'd be great. So, but as I think about stuff, like a medical bill comes in, I'm like, oh man, that was like 2.5 Blackstones. That was really expensive. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe you're simpler than that. Maybe you're more of a Chipotle burrito kind of guy or gal. And so, and it's about $10. And so you're looking at a meal, and let's say you go for a nice meal, and it's like $40, $45. You're like, was that worth 4.5 Chipotle burritos? Probably not. You're probably not as satisfied. But anyway, it's not to be debated. A tithe is 10. That's just what it is. So, and I say it to be funny, but it just is. It's just what it is. It's a tenth. So, the Old Testament now. So this is actually post law given after Sinai. We see that they carry out the same thing, that all tithes go to the Lord. It's 10%. Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30. Every tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the trees, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. So all tithes to the Lord. You can actually even make a case. I'm not going to do this because I don't have time, but you could actually probably make a case. Old Testament giving could go up to as much as 23%, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to keep it at 10. But there is a case to be made for it. So People also were commanded to tithe, and this tithe supported the priests of the day. So the people of the Levi that took care of the tabernacle, they weren't actually given a portion of the land, and so the people tied to them to take care of them. This is Numbers 18, starting verse 23. I'll skip down to verse 24. For the tithe of the people of Israel, which they present as a contribution to the land, I have given to the Levites for an inheritance. Therefore I have said of them that they shall not have no inheritance among the people of Israel. So, Old Testament, very clear, there it's 10% or 23, but we're not going to get into that today. But 10 for the most part is very clear. So, after the Old Testament law or New Testament, and the reason why I make distinction is because Jesus kind of sets a new category. Like we don't follow all of the Old Testament laws anymore. Like we don't worship on Saturday. We don't maintain the dietary laws that are written in the Old Testament, and there's some other things that we don't do. And for this reason, there's several other verses, but Colossians 2:14 would give you a reason for that. So by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, this he set aside, nailing it to the cross. So Jesus basically dying for us makes it an adjustment to the law as well. So what do we do? And I'll be completely transparent to you. There's not a number. There's not a percentage, exact number where you go, I'm following the rules as a good Christian person if I do this. There's not going to be a number in the New Testament. But there are commands to be generous, and there are commands to give regularly, and there are commands to give a percentage as well. And so 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2 says this. He says, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do. So he's basically saying, I've already told the church in Galatia to do this. Now the church in Corinth, you should do this too. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and to store it up as he may prosper, so there will be no collecting when I come. And Paul's, in some ways, his motivation is, I don't want to have to go house to house asking you for funds, but also he's in their regular worship practice, they were giving regularly as well. And then 2 Corinthians 8:12 through 15 talks about specifically that you don't give, depending on the different person, it's a percentage. It's not like, you have to give X amount of dollars. It's just a percentage as well. And I would say also, too, just lastly, until I get to what I hope for you, is God has given us so much. Like God has been so gracious to us. He's been generous to us. And if I live from like he is provider, he owns everything, he's given everything, then I want to emulate that. Also, Jesus giving his life, giving up everything, the humility that he had, showing generosity in that way to people and with his life, I want to do the same thing as well. So what do I hope for you? I know that the New Testament doesn't make it clear, doesn't give you a clear percentage, but what I do think is that there is this idea that we should be like overly generous people in our lives. I think about the passage in Mark. It should be the next passage on the screen, Mark 12, when there's people and there's many rich people that are putting money into the offering boxes. And this widow comes and she puts like a penny in there. And he called his disciples to him and he said, truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to their offering box. And this is why it's a percentage and not just like out of your abundance. Because he says this, for they all contributed out of their abundance. Like, hey, this is extra, I don't need it, have some. Whereas like she contributed out of like, it hurt her. It hurt her. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. And so she shows like this boldness in generosity as well. And I think, you might disagree with me, like you might say, well, there's no number, and so therefore I'm going to pick the number that I want for myself, which you can do that, that's fine. But I think the reason why there isn't a number is because God wanted to actually grow that number. Like he wants us to become the most generous people we can, and that becomes a base layer, and it doesn't become the ceiling. A buddy of mine, he's another church planner. His name's David Lane. They call him Southern Butter, which is really funny when he was up here because he has a really smooth, like singing voice. And we're both from the South, but I don't sound like I'm from the South because I've been Midwestified. And so I found this no accent, which is lovely. Thank you so much. I sound so much more smart. I'm just kidding. I'm just dumb. Anyway, but he talks about this idea. He talks about how we think it's the ceiling, like that 10% is the ceiling of our giving. But what if God wants it to be our floor with our resources? That it's the beginning of our generosity journey as well. So what do I hope for you? So I think the target, at least the beginning target, is for you, that I hope for you, is that one is that you are generous and that you would continue to grow in your generosity. That's my hope, is that you would be a generous person and that generosity would grow every week, every month, every year, whatever that looks like as well. And so pretty practically, what does that look like? Is that I do think that a full tithe, 10%, is something that I would like, I hope that you move towards as well. Now, maybe many of you are already ahead of me, and you're thinking, is that pre-tax? Or is that post-tax? We talking gross? We talking net? What are we talking about? Yeah, you are. So, and what I say to you is, which is more generous? And the reason why I say that is because we want to be generous and we want to grow our generosity. I'll tell you, Cassie, my story. So when early on we were more like the $50 every now and then kind of people, or when I remembered, or back then, online giving wasn't as solid, so you actually had to have the cash, and you actually had to have the plate. Like, we've never passed a bucket here or a plate here, which, if you need that, let me know. We'll start passing them. But we were just kind of like the $50, $100, maybe a month, maybe when we would remember. And then I really started thinking about this, and I really started, I was starting to get challenged on this. And so we really bought into that 10%, like that the pre-tax 10%. That's what we really bought into. And you know what? That was more than a Blackstone. I was like, a month. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was more than a Blackstone a month. That was more than a Blackstone. I was like, I don't want to do that. I could, but God is really now. God has gotten to a point where I don't like. It's just what we do, and we talk about. We try to every year talk about wanting to grow it, like not getting beyond that 10% as well. And there was a time, like before we planted, where we were above that, and then when we planted, life was a little different, and financially and stuff like that too. And so we went back to the 10%. And then more recently, I'm not trying to give you all my. I'm not trying to. This isn't bragging. This is me telling you that we are doing this. Like, that if I'm not modeling this for you, then why would I ask you to do this too? But now, Cassie, not to get in our business, but now she has a full-time job too. And so now we're trying to go. We went back to 10%. Now we're trying to kick that thing back up. If there's a raise or a bonus, I go into my giving. It might be annoying, but I go into my giving. I adjust it. It could be $50 more. It could be $30 more, whatever. I just go and adjust it. Because I believe that God owns everything. At minimum, I want this to be my base. And I want to get to a point where, we're talking radical things with generosity. Partly because I've created margin in my life so that I can do that with my resources. And partly because I want to be a part of what God's doing in the world. I want to be a part of the gospel going forward. I want to be a part of people making disciples in Kansas City. I want to be a part of people making Jesus known outside of Kansas City as well. And so maybe you've never done this before. Maybe you're like, no, I'm not doing that. Cool. I'm not. There's no shame or shade there. What I desire for you, though, is that you be generous and that you grow in your generosity. And so a part of this, like consulting the owner of a house what to do, is that you would each year or each set of time, pray about what percentage you should be giving, and hopefully it gets to a full tithe. If you could do 10% right away, then I would say, why would you wait? Maybe you were giving 10% 2 years ago, and you're like, yeah, I've been doing it, but I don't touch my giving. It's like, well, maybe like your step of faith today is to just go adjust by whatever your increases have been with raises and bonuses over the past few years or whatever else it is. Maybe this is like, I've never given before and I am in debt, bro. Like, I can't do this. And I would just say, you know what? Start somewhere. We did a Sabbath series over the summer, and for someone to do a full 24-hour Sabbath is very difficult in our age. And so we talked about just starting somewhere. Pray about it. Ask God for a percentage, like right now, and look at it as a percentage and go, Lord, what percentage of your income do you want me to give to the church? God, what percentage of your income do you want me to give to, whatever else it is? And ask. And if it's 1%, you know what you just did? You just grew in generosity. If it's 2%, 5%, whatever it is, you grew in generosity. And then the next year, you come back and you go, all right, Lord, what is it this year? I've gotten adjusted to that. Whatever else it is, I'm growing, I'm learning. And I personally do it online. You know why I do it on our online? Because I'll forget. And do you know, 1 month of that is a lot of Blackstones. But like 4 months of forgetting to tithe or something like that, that's a lot of Blackstones. You know what I mean? Like, we're feeding a lot of people. So anyway, but because here's the thing, I desire for you to be generous, and not again. There's no campaign. There's none of this coming to. I want you to get to a place where you trust in God more than you trust in your bank account. I want you to get in a place where your security isn't your savings account. Your security is in God the Father, and that He's going to take care of you. And then I want you to find contentment today. Like, I don't want you to be looking for the next thing, the next house, the next jacket, the next shoes, the next vacation, as a thing that you think that's going to just satisfy everything, because it's not. Like, Jesus is enough. And when we do this, when we get radical with our generosity and we start funding the thing that God is doing in this world, these kingdom initiatives, like, you are participating in work that is going to last for eternity. And it's awesome. And it's so cool that you get to be a part of the work that God is doing in this life. Because that's what I long for you, is that you would be generous, you continue to grow in generosity, so that you can continue to participate in the work that God is doing here in your life, in your neighborhood, in your city, and around the world. And that He wants to use you. Like, there might be dreams that you haven't unlocked yet, because maybe money has been this thing that is keeping you from releasing these dreams that are deep inside you that God wants to use for the kingdom. And so let me pray for us, and then we're gonna keep worshiping together. So God, we love you so much, and God, we ask that you would make us a generous people. If there's doubts or insecurities, worries, fears, God, I pray if I can answer any questions or provide comfort or support there, God, that people would come talk to me. But God, I pray that we'd be a generous people, that we would buy into the fact that you want to use us. And a part of that is to trust the fact that you own everything, that we would be good stewards of what you've given us, God. And so, God, would you continue to work in us? God, if we're asking for a specific percentage, God, if we've never done this before, if we're worried, God, I pray that you would just give us a clear number, even right now. The numbers would just pop over minds, 1%, 2%, 4%, 7.23%, God, whatever it is, that you would just make it very clear. And so we love you, and God, would you move, and would you mature us as a church? I pray this in Jesus' name, amen.